courtroom at Boston Federal Court fell into shocked silence when the screen displayed 40 photographs. 40 families, 80 parents, 40 children. Smiling birthday parties, first days of school, family vacations, normal, happy families. Except nothing was normal, because none of these children were genetically related to the parents raising them. In the front row sat Rachel and David Chen, both 36. Between them sat their daughter Lily, 5 years old, clutching a stuffed rabbit. Lily didn't understand why they were in court. She didn't understand that the woman across the courtroom, the doctor her parents had trusted, had given them the wrong embryo. She didn't understand that somewhere, strangers were raising her biological siblings while she lived with genetic strangers who loved her as their own. Rachel's hands trembled as she held Lily. 7 IVF cycles over 4 years, $140,000 spent. Countless injections, procedures, heartbreaks. And when Lily was finally born, when Rachel held her daughter for the first time, she'd thought their nightmare was over. She'd thought they'd finally gotten their miracle. They had gotten a baby, just not theirs. Across the courtroom sat Dr. Patricia Whitmore, 51, founder and CEO of Whitmore Fertility Solutions, a chain of 6 fertility clinics generating $60 million in annual revenue. She wore a cream-colored St. John's suit worth $3,800, Manolo Blahnik heels at $1,295, and a Cartier watch worth $45,000. Her perfectly coiffed hair, her confident posture, her dismissive expression, everything about her screamed success and control. She scrolled through her phone as if the 40 destroyed families around her were merely a minor inconvenience. Behind her sat 12 attorneys from Morrison Legal Group, specialists in defending medical professionals against malpractice claims. Their lead counsel, William Morrison, commanded $3,500 per hour and had a reputation for making victims look like opportunists. But they were about to face Judge Frank Caprio, specially assigned to this federal case due to its unprecedented scope and complexity. Before we dive into what happened in that courtroom, if you believe in justice and want to support a new channel dedicated to sharing these powerful stories, please hit that subscribe button and like this video. Every subscription helps us bring more of Judge Caprio's wisdom to light. Judge Caprio entered, and everyone rose. At 79, with 37 years on the bench, he'd presided over complex medical malpractice cases before. But the case file before him, case number 2/24 FD 8847, had disturbed him more than any case in his career. 40 families, 40 children, all living lies. This court is now in session, he said quietly, his eyes moving across the 40 families. Case number 2024 FD 8847, the United States versus Dr. Patricia Whitmore. Dr. Whitmore is charged with 40 counts of fraud, 40 counts of assault causing bodily harm, falsification of medical records, and conspiracy to defraud. William Morrison stood immediately. Your Honor, my client Dr. Patricia Whitmore is a pioneer in reproductive medicine. Her clinics have helped over 3,000 families achieve their dreams of parenthood. Whitmore Fertility Solutions has the highest success rates in New England. 78% live birth rate compared to the national average of 42%. This prosecution is a misunderstanding of complex medical protocols and an attempt to criminalize innovative medical practice. The families in this courtroom all have healthy, happy children. Every child was born without complications. Every family got what they wanted, a baby. The genetic confusion, while regrettable, doesn't change the fact that these families are intact and these children are loved. Judge Caprio's jaw tightened. Mr. Morrison, 40 families were given the wrong embryos. That's not a genetic confusion. That's fraud. It's a medical complication arising from complex laboratory protocols, Your Honor, not criminal conduct. We'll see, Caprio said coldly. Ms. Johnson, present the government's case. Federal Prosecutor Amanda Johnson stood, her expression grim. Your Honor, Rachel and David Chen tried to conceive for 6 years. They underwent 7 IVF cycles at Whitmore Fertility Solutions between 2018 and 2020. 7 cycles of hormone injections, egg retrievals, embryo transfers. Each cycle cost $20,000. They spent $140,000 total. It nearly bankrupted them. In January 2020, their 7th cycle finally worked. Rachel got pregnant. 9 months later, she gave birth to a beautiful baby girl they named Lily. They thought their nightmare was over. They thought they finally had their daughter. She paused. 5 years later, on Lily's 5th birthday, Rachel's sister gave them a DNA ancestry kit as a gift, one of those family tree services. Just for fun, they did the test. The results came back showing that Lily shared no genetic relationship with either Rachel or David. 0% DNA match. Their daughter wasn't their daughter. The courtroom was silent except for Rachel's muffled sobbing. Rachel and David were devastated. They contacted Whitmore Fertility Solutions. Dr. Whitmore initially claimed their records showed no issues. But the Chens hired a lawyer and obtained court-ordered access to the clinic's embryology records. What they found was horrifying. She held up documents. On January 15, 2020, the day of Rachel's embryo transfer, the embryologist notes indicate that Rachel's embryo showed poor quality, low viability. Instead of informing the Chens and recommending they wait for another cycle, the clinic substituted a different embryo, one from a different couple who had undergone IVF at the same clinic. This wasn't an accident. This was deliberate. And it wasn't isolated. Our investigation revealed that Whitmore Fertility Solutions engaged in systematic embryo substitution for 8 years, affecting at least 40 families that we've identified so far. Little did anyone know the full scope of Dr. Whitmore's scheme. Your Honor, Amanda continued, Dr. Whitmore implemented a policy she called optimized embryo utilization. Here's how it worked. When a couple's own embryos were deemed low quality or unlikely to result in pregnancy, instead of informing the couple and recommending another cycle, which would mean no revenue that cycle, the clinic would substitute a higher quality embryo from their bank of leftover embryos from other couples. These leftover embryos came from couples who had successfully gotten pregnant and chose not to use their remaining embryos. Dr. Whitmore called them surplus inventory. She used them to boost her success rates without telling anyone. The result? Whitmore Fertility Solutions reported a 78% live birth success rate, nearly double the national average. That exceptional success rate attracted more patients, more revenue, and more investors. In 2022, based largely on those industry-leading success rates, Dr. Whitmore received an $8 million bonus from her venture capital investors. The courtroom gasped. Dr. Whitmore shifted in her seat, but maintained her composed expression. So, Dr. Whitmore, Judge Caprio said, his voice deadly calm, you substituted embryos without telling patients to inflate your success rates and earn bonuses. Whitmore stood, her expression one of professional patience, with people who didn't understand medicine. Your Honor, fertility treatment is extraordinarily complex. Success rates matter because they help patients make informed choices about where to seek treatment. My clinics have helped thousands of families. I optimized medical protocols to maximize positive outcomes. By giving them other people's embryos. By ensuring that patients who desperately wanted children got children. These couples spent years trying to conceive. They spent fortunes. They experienced heartbreak after heartbreak. When they came to my clinic, my job was to help them achieve pregnancy. And I did. 40 healthy babies were born. 40 families are complete. With the wrong babies. Your Honor, genetic connection is just biology. What makes a family is love, not DNA. Rachel and David Chen raised Lily for 5 years. They fed her, changed her diapers, comforted her when she cried, celebrated her birthdays. They're her parents in every way that matters. The genetic detail is irrelevant to their bond. Rachel Chen stood up, shaking with rage. Irrelevant? You gave me someone else's child. I spent $140,000 and 4 years of my life trying to have my own baby. You stole that from me. Mrs. Chen, Whitmore said dismissively, you wanted a child. You have a child. A healthy, beautiful child who loves you. Why are you complaining? Because she's not mine, Rachel screamed. And somewhere, there's a woman raising my biological child. A child I never got to meet, never got to hold as a newborn. You stole my baby and gave me someone else's. Bailiffs moved to restrain Rachel as she moved toward Whitmore. David held his wife as she collapsed, sobbing. Lily started crying, confused and scared. Order! Caprio banged his gavel. When silence finally returned, his hands were shaking. Dr. Whitmore, you just told a mother that her genetic connection to her child is irrelevant. These people spent $140,000 specifically to have their own biological child. You took their money and gave them someone else's embryo without telling them. Your Honor, I gave them a baby. The wrong baby. If Judge Caprio's compassion moves you like it moves millions of others, show your support by subscribing to our channel. We're just starting out, and your subscription means everything. Your Honor, William Morrison interjected, my client's medical decisions were within her professional discretion. Fertility medicine involves complex judgments. This wasn't medical judgment. This was fraud. Caprio's voice rose. She took money for one service and provided a completely different service without disclosure. Amanda Johnson stood again. Your Honor, it gets worse. We need to discuss the downstream effects. When Rachel and David discovered Lily wasn't their biological child, they contacted my office. We opened an investigation. We reviewed 8 years of Whitmore Fertility Solutions records. We identified 40 families where embryo substitution occurred. She pulled out more documents. But here's the additional tragedy. For every family that received the wrong embryo, there's another family whose embryo was used. Rachel and David's biological embryo, the one created from Rachel's egg and David's sperm, was transferred to another couple, Jennifer and Mark Rodriguez. A woman in the gallery stood up, holding a 7-year-old boy's hand. Your Honor, I'm Jennifer Rodriguez. This is my son, Miguel. Except he's not my son. He's Rachel's biological son. We raised him for 7 years thinking he was ours. Now we find out he's genetically someone else's child, and somewhere Rachel is raising our biological daughter. She started crying. Both families are destroyed. Both children are traumatized. Miguel doesn't understand why suddenly there are strangers who are his real parents. Lily doesn't understand why her parents are crying all the time. And all because Dr. Whitmore wanted better success rates for her investor bonuses. Judge Caprio's face had gone pale. So these 40 families, that's actually 80 families. 40 who received wrong embryos, and 40 whose embryos were given to others. Yes, Your Honor, Amanda confirmed. 80 families total have been affected. 80 sets of parents. 40 children growing up with genetic strangers. 40 children who exist but were never transferred to their biological parents. Some of those biological parents don't even know their embryos were used. Some had been told their embryos were non-viable and destroyed. Dr. Whitmore didn't just swap embryos. She created a systematic program of genetic fraud that destroyed 80 families' lives and created identity crises for 40 children. What the judge discovered next shocked everyone in the courtroom. "We also obtained internal communications from Whitmore Fertility Solutions," Amanda said. In 2019, Dr. Whitmore's head embryologist, Dr. Sarah Mitchell, raised concerns about the embryo substitution practice. May I read from her email? Caprio nodded, his expression grim. Dr. Mitchell wrote on March 7, 2019. "Patricia, I'm uncomfortable with the embryo substitution protocol. We're transferring embryos to patients without genetic matching. This violates informed consent principles and creates potential legal liability. We need to either disclose this practice or discontinue it." Dr. Whitmore replied, "Sarah, our success rates are the highest in New England because of this protocol. Success rates drive patient volume. Patient volume drives revenue. Revenue funds your salary. If you're uncomfortable, perhaps this isn't the right position for you." Dr. Mitchell responded, "But we're giving patients the wrong embryos. Don't they have a right to know?" Dr. Whitmore wrote back, "They have a right to have a baby. We're giving them babies. The genetic details are irrelevant to motherhood. Love makes a family, not DNA. This conversation is over." The courtroom erupted. Multiple people were shouting. Rachel Chen was screaming. Judge Caprio banged his gavel repeatedly. "Order! Everyone sit down!" When silence returned, Caprio looked at Dr. Whitmore with undisguised disgust. "Your own embryologist told you this was wrong. She told you it violated informed consent, and you threatened her job." "Your Honor," Dr. Mitchell was overly concerned with technicalities. "My responsibility was to my patients' best interests." "Their best interests? You gave them the wrong babies." "I gave them healthy babies, babies they love, babies who are thriving. The genetic connection is just a detail. A detail they paid $140,000 for." Caprio's voice shook. "These people didn't come to you asking for any baby. They came asking for their own biological children. You took their money under false pretenses." Amanda Johnson stood again. "There's more, Your Honor. In 2021, when Whitmore Fertility Solutions was preparing for additional investor funding, Dr. Whitmore sent this email to her CFO. Our 78% success rate is our biggest selling point for the Series B funding round. Make sure all marketing materials emphasize this. Investors love metrics that beat industry averages. This success rate is worth at least $10 million in valuation increase." Her CFO responded, "The VCs will definitely bite at these numbers. But is the 78% sustainable?" Dr. Whitmore replied, "As long as we maintain our embryo optimization protocol, yes. We're not going to tell them how we achieve it, trade secrets, just emphasize the outcomes." In other words, Dr. Whitmore knew her artificially inflated success rates were worth millions to investors, and she deliberately concealed that those rates were achieved through embryo substitution fraud. Judge Caprio stood, papers shaking in his hands. "So you committed fraud against your patients to defraud your investors for money. I built a successful medical practice that helped thousands of families. You built a fraud scheme that destroyed 80 families. These families have healthy children. Every child is loved and cared for. Where's the harm?" "The harm?" Rachel Chen stood again. "The harm is that I wake up every morning looking at a child who isn't mine. The harm is that I mourned 7 failed IVF cycles, not knowing that on the 7th cycle, my actual embryo was given to someone else. The harm is that my biological daughter's first 5 years, her first steps, her first words, her first day of school, happened with strangers while I was raising someone else's child. The harm is that Lily, who is 5 years old and innocent in all this, now has to learn that the people she thought were her parents aren't her biological parents, that somewhere there are strangers who have a claim to her. Do you understand what that does to a child's sense of identity? Of security? Dr. Whitmore's composure finally cracked. I was trying to help. Fertility treatment has a 42% national success rate. That means 58% of couples fail. They spend fortunes and get nothing. I found a way to help more people succeed. By lying to them. By giving them what they wanted. Babies. We wanted our own babies. Rachel screamed. Not someone else's. If I wanted to adopt, I would have adopted. I spent 4 years pumping my body with hormones. 7 egg retrievals. Do you know how painful that is? Do you know what it does to your body? I did that to have my own biological child, and you stole that from me. The courtroom descended into chaos again. Multiple families were standing, shouting, crying. Children were scared and crying. Judge Caprio banged his gavel for a full minute before order was restored. Dr. Whitmore, Caprio said, his voice shaking with barely controlled fury. In my 37 years on this bench, I've seen medical malpractice. I've seen negligence. But you didn't make a mistake. You didn't have a medical complication. You implemented a systematic fraud scheme that destroyed 80 families to inflate your success rates and earn investor bonuses. You took couples at their most vulnerable, desperate to have children, willing to spend their life savings, willing to endure painful procedures, and you exploited that desperation for profit. Here is my ruling. The courtroom held its breath. Dr. Patricia Whitmore, you are found guilty on all counts. 40 counts of fraud, 1 for each family you deceived. 40 counts of assault causing bodily harm, because subjecting women to IVF procedures under false pretenses constitutes assault. Falsification of medical records, conspiracy to defraud patients and investors. You are sentenced to 20 years in federal prison. You will serve this sentence in full. No early release, no house arrest. Dr. Whitmore's face went white. Her attorneys started objecting, but Caprio's voice cut through. Furthermore, your medical license is permanently revoked in all 50 states. You will never practice medicine again. All 6 Whitmore Fertility Solutions clinics are hereby ordered closed immediately. All patient records will be transferred to an independent medical board for review. You are ordered to pay $100 million in compensatory damages to be distributed equally among the 80 affected families. This will be paid from your personal assets, your company assets, and from the disgorgement of the $8 million bonus you received from investors through fraud. Additionally, I'm ordering the creation of a victim support fund of $20 million to provide genetic testing, counseling, and legal support for all affected families and any additional victims we identify. He leaned forward, his voice hard. You stood in this courtroom and said genetic connection is just biology, and that love makes a family, not DNA. You're right that love makes a family. But these families paid you $140,000 specifically for the biology. They paid you to help them have their own biological children. You took their money and gave them someone else's children. Rachel and David Chen love Lily. They've raised her for 5 years. She's their daughter in every way that matters. But that doesn't change the fact that you stole their biological child from them and gave them someone else's embryo without their knowledge or consent. You didn't give them a choice. You didn't tell them their embryo was low quality and offer them alternatives. You didn't discuss adoption or using donor embryos with their informed consent. You simply took their money, took their embryo, gave it to strangers, and gave them a stranger's embryo instead. His voice rose. And you did this 40 times. 80 families. 40 children who will grow up with identity crises. 40 children who will wonder who their biological parents are. 40 children who will struggle with questions of identity and belonging because you wanted better success rates for investor bonuses. Money can buy fertility clinics. It can buy investor bonuses. It can buy industry-leading success rates through fraud. But it cannot buy your way out of prison when your greed destroys 80 families. Justice cannot have two standards. One for fertility clinic CEOs and one for desperate families who trusted them. These families came to you at their most vulnerable. They trusted you with their dreams of having children. And you betrayed that trust for $8 million in bonuses. The courtroom erupted in applause. Rachel Chen held Lily and David, all three crying. Jennifer Rodriguez held Miguel, both of them sobbing. Families throughout the gallery held each other, crying with relief that justice was finally served. Dr. Patricia Whitmore sat motionless, her empire destroyed, her freedom gone for 20 years. If this story touched your heart, if you believe judges like Frank Caprio represent the best of our justice system, please support our new channel by subscribing and liking this video. Share it with someone who needs to hear that justice and compassion can coexist. Comment below with your city. Let's build a community that believes in fairness for all. Dr. Patricia Whitmore is currently serving her 20-year sentence at FCI Danbury. Her assets were liquidated, totaling $132 million. All 6 clinics were permanently closed. Her medical license was revoked in all states. The 80 affected families each received compensation. But money couldn't fix the damage. Rachel and David Chen are still raising Lily, the child they love but who isn't genetically theirs. Jennifer and Mark Rodriguez are still raising Miguel, the Chen's biological son. Both families are in therapy. Both children are struggling with identity questions. Some families chose to maintain contact with their children's biological parents. Others chose not to. Every family made the decision that felt right for them. But every family was traumatized by the discovery that their fertility doctor had lied to them. The case led to the Genetic Truth in Fertility Treatment Act, federal legislation requiring DNA verification of all embryos before transfer, mandatory disclosure of all embryo sources, criminal penalties for embryo substitution, and requirements for informed consent for any use of donor or leftover embryos. The law passed unanimously. Judge Caprio, when asked about the harsh sentence, said simply, "Compassion isn't an exception to justice. It's the purpose. These families loved and wanted children. Dr. Whitmore exploited that love for profit. 20 years is what that betrayal costs. 40 children are growing up with questions about who they are. 80 families are permanently altered, all because one doctor wanted better success rates to impress investors. But their story exposed how even medicine, supposedly built on healing and helping, can be corrupted by greed. It showed that informed consent matters. It proved that you cannot substitute one person's embryo for another's without it being fraud, no matter how you justify it. Dr. Patricia Whitmore thought she was building an innovative medical practice, thought her high success rates proved her brilliance, thought $8 million in bonuses validated her methods. She was wrong. And the 80 families she betrayed stand as proof that sometimes justice prevails. Sometimes the vulnerable defeat the powerful. Sometimes the courtroom really is the great equalizer. Not because these families were strong, but because they were right. And that was enough.